GM everyone, really lovely to be here with you today, and so very lovely to have all of you here with us. Please do use our chat to say GM, to talk to each other, or to talk to myself or my guest today. This is a really great session for me to be here, especially to launch our social good channel. But just a quick whistle-stop tour. If you haven't used our hub platform before, you have some emojis. Please feel free to always give us some of that flower love, some thumbs up, any of that. Use those emojis as you would. And then if you, as I say, if you have a question, please drop it into the chat. There's a Q&A function, or you can just put it into the chat and we'll pick it up. Today's session is all about social good. And I am pleased to pronounce myself here as the one of the presenters, Alison Alexander. I'm also known as A Metaverse A, co-founder of Metacampus. So that's the whistle-stop tour of the room. The session will plan that I'm going to share some thoughts. Then we're going to be joined by our guest. Then we're going to open up for her and I to have a conversation about our work. And then we're going to open it up to the floor. So any questions, please do drop them in the chat. So very lovely to have you here again. So on that note, I am going to move into the tech bit where I share my screen and we get all of that working. So we now have that. So if you, as I say, any questions, please do feel free to drop them in. So welcome very much to our first session on Web3 and social good. This is known as the Web3 and social good channel. But I think that we would all agree that whilst this is the first session, the reason we have a whole channel is because there is no way that we could cover everything of Web3 and social good in one go. It is for this reason this dedicated channel is here. Please feel free to keep popping back. Every 2 weeks, we're going to have a new guest. The sessions will be there for you to come back to and listen to, because like in all things that are new to us, you might hear the first time and then you want to go back and think, what was it that they said about something? And that's the great thing. You'll always find our sessions there with the button for play recording, and then you can revisit and then go forward and share what you've learned. But because Metacampus is founded on the premise that we have a collective desire to bring about greater equity in the world and to help unlock potential of every human being living in this new digital society, you're going to hear a lot about social good. So don't just think you're going to hear this from me. In fact, all of our team members, all of the sessions today have had a reference to social good. That is going to keep being the theme of what we're doing here. You're going to hear that from our team members. You're going to hear that from our founder and founding partner, our resident contributors, and our guest contributors. Everyone is here because we are all ambitious for Web3 and its ability to bring about greater equity across the globe. That is what we're here for. That's what we know that you're here for, and we really want to help you on that journey. So whilst we're going to constantly talk about social good in this channel, we have this channel to have those dedicated conversations. And the dedicated conversations this time is going to start with our very first guest, and I'm really honored, Melyn McKay, founder of Coala Pay, and I'm really looking forward to hearing so much more about what she's doing. But before she joins, I just wanted to take a few moments and share some thoughts with you. And I'm going to start with my thoughts with what I think is a normal Web3 conversation. And I'm going to start it with that of GM, everyone. Even though, and I think this is really important, GM, everyone, even though we invite you to say it in the chat when you come in, when you join our session, we say, please feel free to say GM. And if you are new to Web3, like I was 18 months ago, you might definitely think, why GM? It's actually, for us in the UK, it's 1 o'clock. In Europe, it's 2 o'clock. And so why? But don't worry, that is exactly the thought that I had when I first came to Web3. In fact, I'm really happy to share that I thought it was quite strange. I thought it felt a little fake. Why were people saying GM to me? Especially, as I say, when it was in the afternoon or the evening. And I didn't quite get it. And until one day I had the aha moment that GM, and that's why I want to start with it, is so much more than a term, 2 letters. To me, and I think I speak about this on behalf of a lot of people, GM is about community. It's about belonging. It's about giving a welcome message to people who are new into the ecosystem. It's about reaching out. It's about saying to people, I'm free to connect. In some platforms, we might say free to network. GM is about saying, welcome to the Web3 ecosystem. Please feel free to reach out to me and talk to me. And so the reason you might think, well, why is she talking about that in a channel of social good? Because for me, it is about inclusion. Those 2 simple letters, GM, are about connecting, being connected, demonstrating, being available to connect, to engage, to build, to share with others. And therefore, all of those words lead us to say that we are being inclusive. We are wanting to include people in the growth of this new ecosystem. And I think when I understood that, I went from this person who was looking in at Web3 to a person who was a part of this new evolving internet. So sometimes we use that term Web3 to describe it because that's easier to someone who's new. So if you're new to this space and you hear the word GM, don't dismiss it, recognize its importance and say it back to someone. It's the best feeling. You're in Twitter and you say GM and you get a GM back. It's such an amazing, it's really uplifting. So try it yourself. And I see the term GM, and obviously this is a really personal view, but I see it very much like I see crypto. I believe that cryptocurrency in of itself is inclusive because it enables us to engage, transact, and therefore connect with people regardless of country, culture, currencies, and economy. And so over the next few months, I'm going to spend time talking with founders who also have this understanding and are using Web3 tools to really unlock human potential. Every one of my guests is going to be talking about and sharing from their view. And that's the most amazing thing. We're going to have different people who will all share their view of what this means and how they are bringing it to a reality. But everything they will share will demonstrate their personal and their company commitment to building an accessible and inclusive and a safe new ecosystem. Because in 2023, we still find ourselves in a position where we're surrounded by inequality. And even though over the last few years, we've sought to bring in legislation, regulation to change that, we're still not quite there. We are still a globe of difference, and difference in which the difference is not welcomed, it's not valued, it's not celebrated. The difference keeps individuals and communities disadvantaged. We got into Web3 because we believed we could break those boundaries by using the tools of Web3, the blockchain, the anonymity that is offered, all of that. So actually, for us, Web3 is about breaking those boundaries and that it's no longer matters where in the globe you are. We can all interact. In fact, what I hope to bring you over the next few months is demonstrable proof of how these new tools, not just what I say or what my colleagues in the Metacampus team say, what we hear Para talk about, Edu talk about, what we're always talking about, but actually that you're going to learn And also our hub gives you at your fingertips those tools for you to go forward. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to be joined by guests who will share, they come from across the globe, and that they will give you tangible examples of how they are using those tools of Web3 combined with their passion to build an accessible, inclusive, and safe society for all. And to just give you a little taste of who's come in, we have Matt from the Mekong Club, who's creating a slave-free world. We have Michelle from Tuttle Tribe, who is increasing the number of women in tech through NFTs. We have Gina from Honey Badgers, using NFTs to change the world of women in developing countries. Esther from Hondu Careers, who is dedicated to eradicating youth unemployment. And we have Kenneth from Mercy Corps Ventures, who's going to come and share their work across the globe with us. So many amazing people changing the world one step at a time, giving us all ideas of how we can go forth and do that more. But today, it's about how Web3 tools are being used to enable better aid for everyone. And so on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to invite Melyn McKay, founder of Coala Pay, to join me on the stage. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Do we have a tech hitch just to like test us all? Hello there. Oh, I can't hear you. Something's gone wrong. So I'm going to assume that you can hear me at this point.
I can. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So what I'm going to do, whilst I'm going to run off and try and come back and fix that tech as to why I can't hear you at this point, is I am going to hand over the floor to you, and then you can pick up, and then I will be back in a few moments, and then I'll join you back on the stage when you've had an opportunity to share a bit about yourself and your work with those who are here with us.
Great. I realize she can't hear me, but you all can hear me, I see. Thanks in the chat for letting me know. I think we've got a few slides to put up here. Can you see those? Great. Okay, well, as Alison said, I'm Melyn McKay. I'm the founder of Coala Pay. And in essence, we like to say that we're building Stripe for the $100 billion international aid industry. I've been designing and delivering humanitarian aid for more than a decade, and in that time I've advised the EU and the United Kingdom's multi-million-dollar funds in Myanmar, designed de-armament and demobilization of informal combatants interventions for the World Bank in South Sudan, and I've evaluated the EU's entire food and livelihoods portfolio in Syria. So a pretty big undertaking, and something that gave me a really good understanding of how the aid sector works and where we have problems that we all are trying really hard to solve. So in 2021, just as I had finished my doctoral research on violent Buddhist nationalism in Myanmar, the military there staged a violent coup. And having seen and experienced so many similar conflicts already, I really hoped that at this stage we now had the financial tools that we needed as a sector to protect civilians and ease suffering, but we just didn't. And that's why I'm so determined to see what we can do with blockchain technology and Web3 more broadly to be able to move money more efficiently, more effectively, and importantly, much more transparently, so that we're just building out a better aid infrastructure for everyone. Money movement and management are among the international aid industry's most protracted problems. And I don't just mean that in the sense of needing to raise money. Of course, we always think about nonprofits having a hard time getting the funds that they need. And we do have a global shortage of aid funding based on what we understand the global need to be in the coming years. But nevertheless, another really big problem is just taking that money that's allocated and actually getting it where it needs to go. And a big part of that is because traditional banks really struggle to service the sector. As you can imagine, like I said, I do a lot of work in Myanmar where the way that people's names work is just not the same as it is in places like Europe and the United States. And a lot of the sort of traditional banking infrastructure has been built with those kinds of people in mind. So you try to send a payment transfer to someone with a Myanmar name, then you might have issues with the actual transfer getting there because they're going to have a lot of questions. One of the intermediary banks or the recipient bank might have a lot of questions about whether or not you've actually even filled out the information correctly, which can mean that they then have to ask for extra information, which delays the payment. And when you're talking about delays and aid payments, you're really talking about people not getting life-saving aid that they need right now. So what happens is that large nonprofits, people like Mercy Corps, who it sounds like are going to be joining in a few weeks, or Save the Children, have to step in almost as fund managers. And we really believe that Save the Children shouldn't have to have more accountants on payroll than it has child protection officers. And we think it's a real shame that in so many instances, that's where their hard-earned fundraising dollars have to go. And it looks then like they have really high overheads, that they're not being efficient with their aid money, when really it's just that the financial infrastructure that they have to use, this legacy infrastructure, isn't built for them. So what we're trying to do with Coala Pay is to remove some of those frictions so that people don't die waiting for aid that's already been allocated and just can't get where it needs to go fast enough. We also feel that too few of the current blockchain solutions for philanthropic money movement, things like fundraising, but also ways to get new people involved in philanthropic giving, too few of those have actually been designed by aid workers. And to speak to what Alison mentioned earlier, a big part of that is about how we bring people into the space and make them feel like they can learn about it and then see what solutions these new technologies might provide for the things that they're doing and in their sort of real world jobs. And that was certainly the case for me. I don't have a background in technology. I don't have a background in blockchain. I've never written a line of code in my entire life. But I was really lucky to be able to connect up with people who did do that and did it really very well. And I was able to just say, I think I have this crazy idea. Could it work? And then they said, yeah, it could. And we started building together. But we want more people who are working on these solutions in the humanitarian aid sector, in development aid, to be able to see the value that Web3 could bring and to then access the talent that they need to be able to actually make it work for them. So we really feel like a big part of why we do these kinds of meetings, and we like to go out and talk to people separately from what we're doing as a company, is because it's really important for people like me who don't know anything about these kinds of technologies and maybe don't even have friends who do, to be exposed to them so that they can start to see how there could be solutions in those technologies for problems that they're facing in their lives or in their work. So that's why with Coala Pay, we really say we think we can make international aid better for everybody. And that's really what we're working to do. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what we're actually doing, because I realize I haven't really gone into that. And a little bit of background about the problem. It's estimated that currency fluctuations alone cost the aid sector more than $200 million in just 2 years during the Syrian civil war. And they bleed a further $1 million each year from the response in Zimbabwe. The World Bank's Ebola funds were held for months without any reason, which of course delayed critical life-saving aid. When they were eventually released, these funds, the intermediary bank charged a $93 million service fee. And of course, there's no way to know why they did that. We have some guesses, but nevertheless, it meant that the World Bank was scrambling to move money that it had already allocated to this response. And of course, you'll know enough about. I think everyone here probably knows enough about Ebola to know that you really don't want a delay with a disease that is so fast moving and that was doing so much damage in communities. So that's with Coala Pay. We're trying to build out a new kind of infrastructure for global charitable giving. And we do that by using a proposal marketplace that makes it easier to find and fund highly effective grassroots aid groups, really trying to make that entire experience totally frictionless. And we're also building out tracking tools like the one you should be seeing on your screen that give donors more control over their impact and give people a better sense of where their money is going and how the impact that they're making is compounding over time. Since we're all Web3 friends here, I guess I'll just put it this way. Coala Pay is tokenizing grant proposals and transforming them into self-executing smart contracts for life-saving aid services. And our wallet-linked impact dashboards, what you see there on your screen, automatically track the total number of people who benefit from your gifts. And that sort of gives a sense of gamifying global giving. And it helps us to improve user retention on our and our partner platforms. I think you can think of it this way. if you would choose to round up at the grocery store to go to charity, of course, you don't really know what happens with those 30 cents, who they give it to, or what they do with that money. Now, with what we're building, you should be able to see exactly how to say how that should go, how it should be used, and to whom, and be able to actually get that money to people who are on the ground in communities delivering services. So very common in the international aid sector for someone like Mercy Corps or Save the Children to work with lots of local partners to make sure that they're being sensitive in the way that they approach certain issues, that they're being mindful of community dynamics, and they're not doing any harm accidentally. And so working with those local partners is really essential to good aid access. And they are often, have a really good sense of what the community needs, and are able to provide that in a way the community is happy with. So they're an essential part of the puzzle, but they often get the least amount of funding. And so in addition to trying to make it just easier and less expensive to send money, we're trying to make sure that it's going to those really effective grassroots partners. And that's something that Web3, it's built into the ethos, but it's also built into the technology. It really makes it much easier for us to connect them up to those sources of funding, because we're able to work with parts of the technology that are easier for them to use. I mean, it's much easier for them to do a KYC with a wallet than it might be, or it's more safe to do that than to do a traditional KYC with a bank in a country that's, for example, dealing with a military coup. So some of the safety and security elements of Web3 are also really important to the local partners that we work with. So whether you're a large nonprofit who's excited about the fact that we can make moving money to your local partners a lot less expensive, a lot faster, and we can help them to navigate that last mile off-ramp piece, getting it from crypto into fiat. Or if you're a company and you want your giving to tell a better story, you could send a bunch of money to one charity and they'll do good things with it. But you could also give directly to those local partners for specific projects that tell your story. If you're, really into sustainable agriculture, and that's a big part of what you're doing as a company, then we could link you up with local projects that are doing sustainable agriculture all around the world. And that makes it a much more compelling way to talk about what you care about and what you're doing about the things you care about. But in the long run, we also want to be a place where people from all around different diaspora communities can come to give back to their home countries, and do that in a way that it doesn't require quite so many intermediaries to get there. So we like to say that we're not just providing a meaningful lifeline to communities in crisis, we're also building out the necessary social and cultural infrastructure to sustain other Web3 start and scale ups in chronically underbanked geographies. So if that sounds like the kind of thing you're interested in, we would love to hear from you. Please, after Alison and I are going to have a chat now, but if you would like to be in touch to hear how you can get involved, we would love that. So please do reach out after our chat here today. Alison, have you managed to sort your technical situation?
I have.
Good. Well, welcome back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That's fine. I went out and came back, solved it. Always the case. Switch off and switch back on, and I am back on. So honestly, amazing. I really just want to say, firstly, thank you for managing the hiccup, and secondly, amazing. I mean, we do have some questions. I am going to kind of start with those, even though I kind of have lots of questions that I want to ask you. I mean, and somebody said it's a silly question, but I don't think it is, because it's about why the name.
It's a really
why the
question.
name.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's one that we actually really love getting. So thank you for asking it. It sounds like a silly name, but the reason is because what happened in the Syrian civil war was that the Syrian government, the Assad government, started to really use foreign currency and cross-border money transfers as a tool in its arsenal to oppress the different groups that were sort of in opposition to it. And that was having an enormously negative impact on the communities. And the aid actors just couldn't get the money in. So they had millions of dollars that they could spend to keep people alive, to get them food, shelter, and they couldn't get the money into the country. And so they started working with these informal cash transfer agents called hawalas. And these are normally guys who maybe have a business in Turkey and a business in Syria. And so they're able to receive money in Turkey and then sort of release the cash in Syria and balance the books. The problem for the aid sector is that even though it's effective, they get it in. It's a nightmare for compliance because we have to report on everything that we spend, everything that we do with the money to our donors, because we're often dealing with taxpayer money. And so what this looks like on a nonprofit's books is that we've just sent money into a random person's bank account and then it has just appeared someplace magically.
Yeah.
And so it was causing a lot of problems, and it took enormous amounts of time and energy to produce the kind of reporting necessary to explain what those transactions were. So when we first started talking about what it is we do, we would often say, well, we're kind of like a crypto koala. So we're a koala. So that's where the name comes from. And it's lucky that, of course, the koala is very cute. We had a great, very Web3 friendly artist who drew that for us, Alex Troshut. And so we love our little koala. His name's Billy, which is short for accountability. And he pops up anytime you get sort of stuck or confused on the website, and says, he's there to help you. So
that is so cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, two things that I just want to come up with around that is firstly, that point that you talked about, the accountability, isn't it? It's something that really does get blocked. And that also reminded me of the point you made around there's more accountants nowadays than social workers or child welfare agents, because they need that to balance that. And actually, as someone who, like, you give to charity, you really want to know that it's going to the frontline worker who's going to be walking along the footsteps of someone. And that's often becomes the tension. How do you cover your overheads when they have to be so high when people want to be funding the frontline work? So again, this is a fantastic way to reduce overheads.
Yeah. And that's really the way we frame it. I think sometimes when we start talking about what we do, people's minds immediately go, and understandably, they immediately think, oh, well, you're getting rid of the intermediaries, and the nonprofits are the intermediaries, these big global nonprofits. But actually, there's a lot of reasons why you need those international nonprofits there. They have great expertise. They have people who've worked for decades in different contexts. So they have that sort of understanding of what worked here and could we try it here. So they have a lot to bring to the table, but they're not accountants, and they're not financial experts, and they have to act like financial services providers, and nonprofits are not designed to do that. And so it's really what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody who is involved in our system benefits in some way. So it's really about that kind of collective value creation, to make it to feel more like collaboration and competition. That's really important to us, that, when you're dealing with international aid, the second it becomes about you or winning, like, you need to get out of there. You're not the right person to be doing that anymore. And so we don't, even though we are a company, we are for profit, we don't think about, how do we dominate this sector? We think about how can we come in and help everyone in the sector? And by bringing that value to them, we end up actually bringing a lot of value to the communities.
And I mean, totally. I mean, as somebody, again, from that world, I can see how you can take this, like Save the Children, you said, Mercy Corps, who are going to join us as well in the future. All of them would be saying, actually, this puts the right money into the right activity at the right time, versus us having to increase the resource that we have to fund because we need to fund both of those activities. You're giving that solution.
Definitely. And I think it's funny because for those of us in Web3, when we often have to defend the fact that cryptocurrencies are so volatile, right? I mean, this comes up all the time. It's so volatile. It's just speculation. It's just gambling. But like, the first thing that happens when there is a crisis somewhere is that the local currency rapidly loses value. So what that means for the aid sector is that if we set aside 500 million for something and we move that money into country and we put it into a bank, and a lot of the organizations have policies around making sure that we are good financial partners as well. So we move that money into country, it's in a bank account, maybe it's being held in fiat, and then the currency loses 60% of its value, like the Myanmar Jat did last summer, the summer before, lost 60% of its value in about 2 weeks. That's 60% of the value of your fund that's just disappeared. But you've written a bunch of you've signed all of your contracts with donors. talking about how you're going to deliver all of these programs, all of these services, help all of these people. And you can't because you just don't have the funding anymore. So with stablecoins, a big part of what we're offering to our nonprofit users and to our donors is that the money that they're sending can hold its value in the currency they meant to send it in USDC, USDT. And the local partners then have a safe way to hold that value no matter what's going on in their local economy. Because the last thing you want is to be trying to deliver, life-saving aid services in the middle of an ongoing crisis, and you're realizing that the amount of money in your bank account is just being drained, and you're trying to move it around to save the value of it. So we want them to be able to focus on doing the work, not thinking about making sure they're not losing money.
And it also is what I liked, and I think that does connect, is your statement that actually sometimes people are in one country and they really are passionate about a particular area they want to fund. And I'm going to say they don't know how to take I'm just going to say their £100 or their £10. I mean, if you think of young people in schools and everyone, they don't know how to take that and help it have impact like thousands of miles away. And again, what you've just shown us is actually you can say, what is important to me? What am I passionate about? And that might just be because you are a person with that interest, or that you have come from that region and you want to put money back into it. You've just shown a way that people can do that without needing all of these middle people to do that. And you can see, I love your kind of the global view of how many people you're impacting. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think there are a couple of things we've really intentionally thought about in terms of UX. I, again, not a tech person, and I tend to be pretty cranky when I'm faced with new technology that I find overwhelming or badly organized. So like I'm a long-term Discord hater. It's like a whole activity.
We won't say that.
Right? No one heard it. No one heard it. But I do think that we have a moral imperative when we're working with communities in crisis to ensure that nobody is having to go to a Discord channel because they cannot figure out how to connect their wallet or something like that. It's just not a fair thing to do to people. And so we really focus on the user experience. And part of that means that we've also thought through the kind of what it is that you're looking for when, let's say for the first time in your life, you find out that someone in your family has a disability. And you have this real desire to do something, and you want to turn that sort of emotion into action. And so you start looking around, and because you don't know how to evaluate whether or not an aid organization is trustworthy, you tend to just use size, right, as a proxy. This is the biggest charity, biggest organization, so we're going to go there. What we do on our site is that we actually can show, you can search by donor. So you can say, okay, who else has given to these local organizations? So let's say every year you give to Mercy Corps, you give to UNICEF, and you give to Oxfam. You could select Mercy Corps, UNICEF, and Oxfam, and then you would see the local partners that they have funded on our website. And what that means, not to say that these three organizations are using our website, I don't want to imply that, but what it means
we'll get them there for you.
Okay? we're still building. But what it means is that then that trust is kind of transferred to their local partners, the ones that they work for, and you can then look at those local partners and say, okay, if UNICEF is sending them money, then surely it's trustworthy for me to send them money. Then that way, if something happens, let's say flooding in Pakistan, you want to help, you don't know where to send your money, you could go onto Coala Pay, see which local organizations are there proposing flood recovery activities. You could see who else has funded them. And that just bridges that trust divide so that it starts to feel a lot less like international aid, and that's sort of mediated by governments or by other actors, and more like mutual aid, which is really the direction we want to take things in. We want people to feel as comfortable and as safe sending money to a local organization in Myanmar as they feel donating to a GoFundMe for someone who has that they don't know, but who has something going on in their lives that they can intuitively understand and empathize with. So we really want to bring those two types of people closer together.
And it really, I just feel totally empowers me as a person. I can really choose, and I can take my pound and do what I want with my pound, and I can see the impact, and I'm not and it does come to a question. I'm not dependent on a kind of middle person or an institution, and I don't have to do what you said, that you think, well, I don't know if that person's just paying into their bank account, so I'm going to go with a larger one. So absolutely, you actually get those people on the ground the money they need to do the work they're doing, because they're probably also going to be doing it at a lot less cost than some of those others. So it just really spreads it around. But somebody's asked a question.
Yeah, I'm just seeing that.
About the so can you see that? Without
I can see it, yeah.
Go for it. So do you want maybe to say the question so that everybody knows what we're answering?
Yeah, so the question is that the benefit of blockchain to avoid middlemen is self-evident, but such a progressive technology seems to be at odds with the tech literacy in developing countries. Am I biased by a Western-centric prejudice? Gently and lovingly, yes. Which I had that too, right? I had better internet connectivity in Yangon than I ever had in London, because everything's 5G. But what that also means is that in many of these places, mobile technology has leapfrogged financial access. When I lived in South Sudan, there was not an ATM in the entire country. Or if there was, it was very well hidden and not functional, because I looked. So how then do you get that money out in that kind of environment? That's a lot of places in the world that are like that, but everyone has phones. Increasingly, everyone has smartphones. And what that also means is that the sort of tech literacy is really mobile literacy. And, from Kenya to Myanmar to, lots of places around the world, people are using mobile banking as their primary form of money movement. So the leap from using something like M-Pesa to using something like the Valora app, which was built by Fellow, and which is gaining lots of popularity in Kenya, for example. The leap between that sort of knowledge and how do I use this mobile wallet is not as high as it is for some of us who've never, or barely used mobile banking, because it's not actually that, I don't know. I've only just started making, PayPal payments with my phone, for example, because it wasn't available to me in the places that I lived. So, so I think there is a lot more. And actually, one of the things that's really cool is that we're learning so much about, we're learning so much and seeing so much innovation from the local partners and what they do and how they handle it. Things that we wouldn't have even thought about. So it's also a great way for us to take that insight and that knowledge, people who are using this technology, because for them it is a lifeline, not just like a nice to have. They're really leading the innovation in terms of use, and there's a lot that we can learn from them.
Yeah. And literally, I was on a podcast the other day and we was talking about this point that sometimes we don't realize how, and I was talking about it in the context of younger people nowadays, that actually if governments don't take a strategic approach to education and the preparation of people for readiness, for work readiness, people in this country, so I was talking about it in the UK, that people in other countries are going to leapfrog our young people because they are so much more being prepared, because for all the reasons you've just said, the tech is there to enable them to do it. It is how they live. It is their lifeline. And where we have those options, actually, we're not grabbing hold of them as quickly. I don't feel that we're grabbing hold of them as quickly. And I feel, particularly where I look around in the UK, I'm going to say in some of the states, we can actually be putting our young people, the next generation of workforce, in a negative position if we don't stop.
At a disadvantage. Definitely. I mean, I can say a few years ago, I was doing a piece of research. I'm an anthropologist by training. And I was doing a piece of research for Save the Children in Myanmar, and we were working with Rohingya. This is one of the minority groups within Myanmar who have been really horrifically oppressed by the government. You may have heard about the Rohingya crisis, which was a genocide, and 1 million people were pushed out of the country into Bangladesh. This is the Rohingya population. Many of them remain in what are effectively open-air containment camps. I mean, really horrific conditions. They're completely dependent on aid, which then the government uses the aid to that population as a sort of choke point whenever the international community does something they don't like. So it's a really difficult situation. And in those camps, doing research with these young people, looking at the impact that social media had on, for example, had on their mental health and their emotional well-being, one of the things that we found was that they said, look, this is our only connection to the outside world anymore. And so it's a lifeline for us for self-improvement, for education. And there were kids in the camps who were teaching themselves to code just using their phones, because that was the only kind of livelihood they could see for themselves. And you know, it really speaks to the fact that when you have less, these technologies really do open up the world for you in a way that maybe, you know, for a teenager growing up in the United States, it's more for exploration than it is for need. And so it is a slightly different impetus.
Yeah, no, and I think it is about making sure we really invite people to look at that in that rounded way, isn't there? Because sometimes I feel we can, again, I think somebody wrote our Western-centric prejudice. I think we can apply that when we're looking into other countries. Well, if they don't have this bit sorted, we need not to focus on the tech. No, that is the bit that is lifting people out of poverty, as you said. Kids are teaching themselves coding. It's education that lifts people out of poverty. I am and education can come in different. This is education. This session is. I'm not about classroom based, but I am so passionate that if we deny ourselves education, we put ourselves at a disadvantage, and that is our job collectively.
Yeah,
but we've got another great question.
Oh, I was just going to say, you very quickly, you sparked something for me, which is that I think all the time about the fact that DAOs and DAO voting and quadratic voting, participating, when we say we want to help countries become more democratic, we want to support democratic processes, right? Which I know, like, as an American, believe me, I know, like, grain of salt. But nevertheless, you know, if we say that's something that's important to us, and then we really try to support these places around the world with tools and systems change so that they can be more democratic. But the people who live there have never practiced democracy. They've never experienced democracy. So they have no reason to trust in democracy. Giving people the opportunity to participate in things like DAOs and DAO voting is a way to practice that and to learn about it and to see that, you know, if you do this, then you can trust in the community in these ways. And so there are, I think, also ways where, on a very high level, I mean, that sounds maybe like it's quite so philosophical, but I do think it's true. Giving people the tools to practice certain things in this technology and in this space is actually directly applicable to things that we're trying to achieve out there in the world.
And it's definitely one. I'm on a panel soon around, and one of the women there, Sharonda, who is a nurse, has set up her first as the first nursing DAO. For a lot of those reasons, for people to take control, to practice, like absolutely what you said. But I'm going to take your example and I'm going to share that with them when we talk. But you've got another. Firstly, you've got another huge. You've got a compliment. So, firstly, really important. Congratulations on such awesome initiative. So, that's great. But then the question is how you vet projects. Yeah,
good question. Really good question. So our initial sort of onboarding is that we go to the nonprofits and we say, hey, you know, which local partners are you already working with? Which ones do you really like and want to keep working with? Can we get them onto the platform for you so that you can make the payments to them much easier and faster and safer? And so we kind of work with those local organizations that are already receiving funding from large nonprofits. But then later on, we want to introduce kind of a recommendation system where existing partners can say, hey, there's another local organization that we met and we love, or, you know, trusted friends of the network can say, hey, you know, I met this organization, they're doing great work. We take all of those local organizations through a pretty comprehensive due diligence and vetting process that involves everything from checking to make sure no one involved in the group has any involvement in the sort of sanctions list, which is something you have to worry about in a lot of these places, but also doing a KYC, and also then actually contacting people in the community where they say that they work to make sure they actually work there, because sometimes that is an issue. And so we do this sort of enhanced vetting process to make sure that once an organization is on the platform, you can really trust that whatever they're proposing, they are really a trusted partner. And we do this in a way that we try to make it as transparent as possible. So if you were to kind of click on on one of these, we do everything as NFTs, and I can talk a little bit more about why we do that and how, but really they're contracts or services. When you click on a contract and you look at, you know, the details, you actually see a whole list of due diligence materials that you can click on and view.
Wow.
So you can see, okay, they did a KYC. They've confirmed that they can get money out from crypto into fiat. They've actually done an impact evaluation and submitted it for us, so we can see that. And all that's right there, so that when you're looking at it, maybe it doesn't matter to you, you know? And so you go, I don't really care if they've done any of these things, as long as I'm not committing any crimes by sending some money to people who are on a watch list or something, then I don't really care. I don't need to know more. But maybe you're a large international nonprofit and you have a lot of these compliance requirements, and so you need to see those documents. You can decide what level of risk you're comfortable with in working with the local partners, but all of them, even to be on the platform, will have gone through a high level of due diligence and vetting. But then we don't tell them what activities to propose. That's entirely up to them. Eventually, we will, well, and hopefully up to their communities, really, right? Because we want them to be community responsive organizations, not donor responsive organizations. But in the long run, what we're hoping to do is launch a little library area where donors can submit what we call requests for proposals. So they say, you know, here's the kinds of activities that we'd like to see. And then the local partners, if they're kind of like, we could do a lot of things, how do we prioritize? Then they could go to that library and they could see these different requests for proposals and say, okay, there's a lot of money here for people really want education programs in Myanmar. Cool, we can do education. We're going to propose some education activities. So helping to make sure that this sort of supply-demand problem has a point of articulation to make sure that they can communicate if they need to, but we don't tell them what to pitch. Because, or what to submit, because like I said, we really want them to do what they think is important in their communities.
And I just had to write something in the notes because I didn't want to lose it, because I loved your comment about being community driven. Such an important, especially when you come to, I'm going to again say, talking to regular people who, because it is regular people's money who fund these initiatives, and that's the most important thing they want to know, is my money impacting, which comes all the way back to your kind of performance scorecard, doesn't it, of like, this is how your pounds are impacting on these people. And that is just so important. It really is. So, oh my God, so amazing. You have to come back and say more. But in a sense, the same as like what we're doing is having you here, is because what we're saying is, to be honest, we love your work, we love what you're doing, and we really do want to partner with you in as many ways possible. And we want to put you on here so that anyone who comes, who listens, and people have already said we should make this public, we'll make snippets out there so that then actually people can see what you're doing. And our job is to help you do what you're doing. And that's what this is all about. So I have to say, an amazing thank you for coming. I know you've been traveling the globe recently.
I've been calling in from Switzerland, so it's a rainy day here in Zug. I just wanted to say, I dropped our Twitter handle down in the Q&A or in the chat box. So please, if you have other questions, reach out. We love to talk about what we're doing, and we really, want to encourage people to get involved. And I don't know, Alison, if you were already going to say this, but I wanted to just say thank you, a big heartfelt thank you to Metacampus and the team over there, because you have been such a fantastic group of people to work with, and such a warm early supporter of ours, and it means a lot. The ability to turn the local partners to trustworthy and interesting, engaging materials so they can learn about the space is just such a lifesaver, and we're really appreciative.
Oh no, thank you so much. And what I'm going to say is, we're going to drop your contacts on the card where people can come and watch the recording. What you just really helped me realize, I need to drop people's LinkedIn. Usually we just put your name and your @ with the handle, but we will put more there. So if people didn't get it here, they can go back to the card and we can do that, and therefore they can always do that and see you. So I want to also say, you have had the most hands up, thumbs up ever. You have pushed it over 100, So I just want to say, I want to say thank you to the audience who have been pushing those buttons, and really, because that's really important to know that you're being heard, people are enjoying it, and that's brilliant. But literally, please come back in a couple of months. We'll have more conversation,
Anytime.
find out what you're doing, and find out what else we can do to help you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks to everyone for being here and hearing a little bit more about what we're doing with Coala Pay.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. So as we say, coming to the end of our session, remember we do have this channel every couple of weeks. Check in, listen to our stories, go back, reread that, re-listen to them, share them, or get people to now go check out Coala Pay on their Twitter, their LinkedIn, all of that. And then visit the rest of our hub, look around, learn new things, and then check back in, everyone. So thank you very much on that. And on that, I'm going to call it a day.